You want to know how the humans broke us?
Fine.
I will tell you, though speaking these words still makes my throat sacs constrict with something between rage and what I think they call respect. My name is Vekthor Quin, and I was a senior intelligence coordinator for the Draknor Collective when we made our most catastrophic mistake. We decided to invade Earth. Look, I know what you are thinking. Another species talking about how terrifying humans are, right?
How they are unpredictable and violent and all that boring rhetoric.
But sit down and close whatever appendages you use for mouths, because this is not that kind of story. This is about the day we learned that breaking human technology was easy. Breaking human spirit, that was impossible. It started 6 cycles ago when our deep space reconnaissance drones picked up transmissions from Sol 3. The Draknor Collective had been expanding for 3 centuries, absorbing 17 star systems without significant resistance. We had perfected the art of overwhelming force. Hit hard, hit fast, shatter their infrastructure, and watch them collapse into surrender within weeks. It worked every single time. Earth looked pathetic, honestly. Their technology was at least 4 generations behind ours. Their weapon systems? Laughable. We had plasma artillery that could glass continents. They had chemical propulsion missiles that took minutes to reach orbit. We had shield generators that could deflect asteroid impacts. They had metal plates welded to vehicles and called it armor. Our military analysts could not stop laughing when they reviewed the data. They still use combustion engines. My colleague Sarna wheezed, her gill flaps quivering with amusement. For transportation. Can you believe it? Our Supreme Commander, a grizzled veteran named Vekthor Quin, was more cautious. He had seen 200 battles across 3 sectors, and something about the human data bothered him, though he could not articulate why. Run the projections again, he ordered, his mandibles clicking with irritation. Something feels wrong. The tactical computer spat out the same results it had generated 40 times already. Estimated time to complete subjugation, 6 weeks. Estimated Draknor casualties, minimal. Probability of success, 99.7%.
You were being paranoid,
Sarah said, though she said it respectfully because Thorvik could have her executed for insubordination if he felt particularly cranky that morning. Their largest military force has fewer than 3 million active soldiers. We are bringing 400,000 shock troops with full orbital support. The mathematics are not complicated. Thorvik stared at the holographic display showing Earth spinning slowly in the projection field, blue and white and green, completely undefended except for a handful of primitive satellites. Begin the invasion, he finally said, though I noticed his tail did not swish with its usual confidence. But I want continuous updates. Something about these creatures makes my scales itch. We should have listened to those itchy scales. The initial assault went exactly as planned, which should have been our first warning. Nothing ever goes exactly as planned. We hit 6 major population centers simultaneously at dawn, local time zones adjusted for maximum psychological impact. New York, London, Beijing, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, Lagos. Our dropships materialized through the cloud cover like metal rain, thousands of them blotting out the morning sun. The humans scattered like startled insects, their primitive alarm systems wailing uselessly. Our shock troops deployed with practiced efficiency, establishing perimeter zones and targeting their military installations. Within 40 minutes we had knocked out 73% of their major defense networks. Their satellites fell silent. Their communication grids collapsed. Their power infrastructure went dark across 3 continents. Resistance is minimal, Sarada reported, unable to keep the smugness from her voice. Most military units are in complete disarray. Some are surrendering without firing a shot. Casualties? Thorvik asked. Theirs or ours? Thor's. 17 wounded, none serious. 1 transport suffered minor damage from a shoulder-mounted rocket that somehow got past point defense. Thorvik nodded but said nothing. I could see his claws flexing against the command console, a nervous habit he thought nobody noticed. By the end of the first day we controlled every major city on 3 continents. By the end of the first week, human governments were collapsing faster than we could process their surrender requests. Their military forces were scattered, their supply lines severed, their leadership decapitated. We had won. Or so we thought. The change started subtly, like a shift in atmospheric pressure before a storm. Our troops began reporting anomalies. Nothing they could quite define at first, just a feeling that something was different. They are not surrendering anymore. A squad leader named Korath, reported from the New York occupation zone. Not officially, they just stop responding. They look at us with these flat expressions, and then they vanish into their buildings. Then root them out. Sorna snapped. You have plasma rifles, Sayers. They have handguns that fire metal pellets. This should not be difficult. That is the thing, Coordinator. It is not difficult. It is impossible. They know every alley, every basement, every tunnel. The city is a maze, and they are the ones who built it. We control the streets during daylight, but after dark, Korath paused, and I heard something I had never heard from a Draknor warrior before. Uncertainty. After dark, they control everything. Increase patrols, Thorvik ordered. Install monitoring systems. This is basic occupation protocol. But it was not basic. Nothing about this was basic. The attack started small. A sniper round that took out a squad member in Chicago, fired from a window 6 blocks away, the shooter vanishing before our forces could triangulate the position. An improvised explosive that destroyed a patrol vehicle in London. The trigger person watching from a coffee shop across the street, looking completely innocent until our sensors caught the detonation signal from their pocket. Then the attacks got bigger. A coordinated strike in Tokyo disabled 6 of our heavy transports using nothing but homemade thermite charges and perfect timing. A group of teenagers, and yes, I said teenagers, managed to hack into our secondary communication network and broadcast the most obnoxious music I have ever heard on all our command frequencies for 6 straight hours. We still do not know how they did it. This is not military resistance, I told Thorvik during a strategy session 2 weeks into the occupation. This is something else. They are not following any doctrine we have encountered, because they do not have a doctrine anymore, he replied, studying casualty reports with his good eye. The other one had been damaged in a previous campaign. We destroyed their command structure. We severed their communications. They should be fragments of a broken system. Then why are our casualties increasing? Thorvik did not have an answer for that. The worst part was not the attacks themselves. We could handle attacks. We had fought insurgencies before, crushed them with overwhelming force and patience. But this, the humans were not just fighting us. They were adapting to us, learning our patterns, exploiting every weakness with a speed that bordered on precognitive. We adjusted our patrol routes. They adjusted their ambush locations faster. We upgraded our sensor networks. They found blind spots we did not know existed. We implemented strict curfews. They ignored them and moved through the darkness like it was their natural habitat. They are talking to each other, Sarna said during one briefing, her scales showing stress patterns.
Yeah.
Without our sensors detecting it, we have their entire electromagnetic spectrum locked down, but somehow they are coordinating across entire cities. Impossible, another officer said. Then explain the simultaneous attacks on 17 different checkpoints last night, all using the same tactics, all within a 4-minute window. Nobody could explain it. We would learn later. They were using runners, actual physical messengers moving on foot, bicycle, or through their underground tunnel systems. Methods so primitive our sensors literally were not calibrated to consider them as threats. But the real breaking point, the moment when I personally understood we had made a terrible mistake, came during what they called the Battle of Atlanta. It was not a battle by our standards. Battles involved armies, proper formations, defined objectives. This was chaos given tactical form. Our forces had established a major base in the ruins of what had been their centers for disease control. Ironic considering we were treating the human population like a virus to be contained. 3,000 troops, full air support, enough firepower to level what remained of the city. The humans attacked at dawn on the 24th day of occupation, and they did it with weapons that should not have worked. Molotov cocktails, literally bottles filled with flammable liquid, and a burning cloth, technology that predated their industrial revolution, against plasma rifles and kinetic barriers. And it worked. Because they did not attack our soldiers. They attacked our supply lines, our power generators, our water purification systems. They attacked everything that kept our forces operational in a hostile environment. Within 3 hours, our base was an island of increasingly desperate soldiers surrounded by a city that had become actively hostile. We need air support, the base commander screamed over the comm system while fires raged around the perimeter. Negative, Thorvik replied, his voice cold with the realization of what was happening. They have shoulder-mounted anti-aircraft weapons positioned on every tall structure. We have already lost 2 gunships. They are baiting us into an aerial engagement we cannot win without acceptable losses. Then send ground reinforcements. From where? Every unit within 50 kilometers is pinned down by similar attacks. This is happening in 12 cities simultaneously. I watched the tactical display as the icons representing our forces began winking out one by one. Hulk not destroyed. Not really, just isolated. Surrounded, slowly being bled by an enemy that refused to fight fair. Because here is what we learned about humans that day. They do not have honor in combat like we do. They do not have rules of engagement that limit their creativity. They do not care about fighting with dignity or style. They care about winning. By any means necessary. The base in Atlanta held out for 6 days before the commander surrendered, not because they were overrun, but because they ran out of water. The humans had cut the supply lines and then just waited. They offered surrender terms that were shockingly reasonable, all things considered, and our soldiers accepted because the alternative was dying of dehydration. This is unacceptable, Sarnar raged in the command center. We should glass the entire city as an example. And prove their point? Thorvik asked quietly. That we are the monsters? We are the conquerors. They should fear us. They do not fear us, Sarna. That is the problem. They hate us. Yes.
They want us gone.
Absolutely. But fear? He gestured at the displays showing coordinated resistance across 17 time zones. Fear makes species submit. Anger makes them fight. And humans, he laughed, a bitter sound that rattled his throat sacs. Humans do not know how to stop fighting. That night I began compiling what would eventually become the official report on human resistance tactics. I interviewed captured soldiers, analyzed combat footage, studied every engagement we had data for, and I found a pattern. Every species we had previously conquered followed predictable arcs of resistance. Initial shock and panic, brief period of coordinated military response, collapse into fragmented insurgency, eventual submission as resources dwindled and hope died. Humans did the first 3 steps just fine. But that 4th step, submission, they skipped it entirely and went straight to innovation. When we destroyed their factories, they built new weapons in basements and garages. When we took their leaders, new ones emerged from populations we had dismissed as civilians. When we controlled the cities, they owned the spaces between cities. And most terrifying of all, when we thought we had broken their spirit, we discovered they had something we had not accounted for in our invasion calculations. They had stories. They found a video on a captured device, something that had been spreading through their underground networks faster than we could suppress it. An old human woman, maybe 70 years by their calendar, speaking to a camera in a ruined apartment, while explosions echoed in the background. Was a sheen echoed in the background. They came here thinking we would break, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. They saw our weapons and thought they knew what they were up against. But here is what they did not understand. Humans do not fight because we have the best guns. We fight because we have something worth fighting for, and you cannot bomb that. You cannot shoot it. You cannot take it away. She held up a photograph too blurry for me to make out details. This is my granddaughter. She is 9 years old and she is alive somewhere in this city, and I am going to make sure she grows up free. So no, we will not surrender. We will not break. And eventually, she smiled. And it was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen on any species. Eventually, you are going to realize you made a mistake coming here. The video ended. I watched it 17 more times trying to understand what made it so effective as propaganda. Then I realized it was not propaganda. It was a promise. And humans, I was learning, keep their promises. The collapse of our occupation did not happen overnight. It happened slowly, like watching ice melt under a sun you cannot see but can definitely feel. By week 5, we had lost operational control of 8 major cities. Not through direct military defeat. Understand, we still had superior firepower, better armor, more advanced everything. But the humans had figured out something that our 300 years of conquest had never taught us to counter. They had figured out that you do not need to defeat an occupying force, you just need to make occupation unsustainable. We are spending 4 times our projected resources. I reported to Thorvik during what would be our final strategic meeting on Earth. Food, water, ammunition, medical supplies, everything. The supply chain from orbit is constantly under attack. Not enough to stop it, just enough to make it expensive. Ruinously expensive. Give me numbers, he said, looking older than I had ever seen him. Command ages you fast when you are losing. At current expenditure rates, we can maintain occupation for another 3 months before we need to redirect resources from other sectors. 6 months before we start impacting our core territories. The Collective Council is already asking questions. Sarna slammed her claws on the table, cracking the surface. This is ridiculous. We are the Draknor Collective. We have conquered 17 star systems. How are we being defeated by a species that still uses fossil fuels? We are not being defeated, Thorvik said quietly. We are being exhausted. He was right, as usual. The humans had somehow turned their technological inferiority into an advantage. Every weapon they built cost almost nothing compared to our equipment. Every soldier they lost was replaced by 3 more who learned from the previous one's mistakes. Every tactic we countered spawned 5 new variations before we could update our doctrine. It was like fighting water. You could strike it, sure, but it just flowed around your fist and kept coming. The breaking point came in week 7, and it started with something so small I almost missed it in the daily reports. A human child, maybe 12 years old by their reckoning, walked up to one of our checkpoints in what used to be called Seattle. She was carrying a white cloth tied to a stick, one of their traditional symbols for parley. Our soldiers, exhausted and paranoid from weeks of ambushes, nearly shot her on sight. "I have a message," she said in broken Draknor, which was impressive because our language requires throat structures humans do not possess. From the resistance, the checkpoint commander, a veteran named Quillix, made the smart choice and contacted command before responding. Thorvik himself reviewed the situation and gave permission to hear the message. The girl looked directly at the camera drone hovering nearby and spoke in clear English, knowing we would translate it. "We know you are tired. We know you are scared. We know you want to go home." She paused, and something in her expression reminded me of that grandmother from the video. That same terrible certainty. "Here is what we offer. Leave peacefully in the next 48 hours. And we will not pursue. We will not attack your ships. We will let you retreat with honor intact." Quillix laughed, a harsh scraping sound. "And if we refuse, then we stop being nice." She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly that it took a moment for the threat to register. "You are already attacking us constantly." Quillix snarled. "What do you call that?" "Practice," the girl replied. "We have been figuring out what works. Now we know, so you have 48 hours to decide if you want to find out what we have been saving for special occasions." Then she turned and walked away, and none of our soldiers had the courage to shoot a child in the back, which the humans had definitely been counting on. "It is a bluff," Sarna declared after watching the recording. "They are beaten and desperate and hoping we will panic." "Maybe," Thorvik said. "But what if it is not? Then we call their bluff. We increase military pressure. Show them we will not be intimidated by theatrical displays from juveniles." I cleared my throat, which made both of them look at me, with varying degrees of irritation. As intelligence coordinator, I was supposed to provide information, not opinions, but I had been studying humans for 7 weeks now, and I had learned something important. "Humans do not bluff," I said carefully. "Not like this. They exaggerate sometimes. They mislead. They use deception tactically, but direct threats, those are always real." "Explain," Thorvik commanded. "Every major resistance action has been preceded by a warning, sometimes subtle, sometimes obvious, but always present. The Tokyo transport attack? They graffitied a warning on the building across the street 3 days prior. We just did not recognize their symbolic language. The Atlanta siege? A human radio broadcast told our forces to evacuate 2 weeks before the assault began. We thought it was propaganda. It was not. It was courtesy." "Courtesy?" Sarna's laugh was acid. "They are killing our soldiers and you call it courtesy? They are killing soldiers who ignore warnings. Also, every human I have interviewed says the same thing in different ways. They do not want to fight. They want us gone. But if we will not leave, they will make us leave. And they always announce their intentions first because apparently that is part of their cultural combat ethics." "That makes no tactical sense," Sarna protested. "It makes human sense, which is different." Thorvik was silent for a long moment, his good eye studying the frozen image of that 12-year-old girl with her white flag and her terrible promise. "Increase defensive postures," he finally ordered.
"Be full alert status."
"I want to know the instant anything unusual happens." The humans waited exactly 48 hours and 17 minutes. Then they showed us what they meant by special occasions. It started with the lights going out, not just in one city, Everywhere we had occupation forces, simultaneously, every backup generator, every power cell, every electrical system we had deployed just stopped working. Electromagnetic pulse? Someone suggested. Negative, our technical officer reported. Confusion in every syllable. All equipment is intact, just not functioning. It is like they flipped a switch we did not know existed. Then the attacks began, and they were nothing like what had come before. In Moscow, 300 humans in homemade armor appeared out of the metro tunnels and overran a garrison of 500 Draknor troops using nothing but coordination, speed, and absolute fearlessness. They took casualties that should have broken any sane species and kept coming. In Sydney, our entire Pacific Command Center discovered that every computer system had been compromised for weeks. The humans had been inside our networks, watching, learning, and waiting. They crashed everything simultaneously and walked out with classified intelligence before we could respond. In Mexico City, something exploded at our main ammunition depot that our sensors said was impossible. The humans had somehow weaponized their own atmospheric chemistry, creating a chain reaction that consumed 6 blocks and took out 40% of our ordnance reserves in the region. But the worst, the absolute worst, was what happened in Paris. Our occupation headquarters was in a reinforced bunker that could withstand a direct nuclear strike, impenetrable by any standard we knew. The humans did not try to break in. They flooded it. The Sena River, which ran near the facility, was somehow redirected through the old catacombs, those ancient tunnels beneath the city that our scans had dismissed as irrelevant. Millions of gallons of water poured into our base through access points we had not even known existed. By the time we realized what was happening, 300 soldiers were trapped in a concrete box rapidly filling with freezing water. The humans offered to help evacuate them if we surrendered the facility. Thorvik gave the order within minutes. He was many things, but he was not willing to let his people drown to preserve his pride. How? Serna kept repeating as we watched base after base report catastrophic situations. How did they coordinate all of this without communications we could monitor? Because we were monitoring the wrong things, I said, finally understanding. They used runners, hand signals, prearranged plans, dead drops, everything analog and ancient and completely invisible to our sensors. We were listening for digital chatter, and they were passing handwritten notes. That should not work, Sarna screamed. That is not how modern warfare functions. It is how human warfare functions, Thorvik said, his voice empty of emotion. And we should have studied their history more carefully before coming here. He pulled up a file on his console, something he had been reviewing privately. Historical records we had obtained during the initial intelligence gathering. Do you know how many wars humans have fought? He asked. Against each other, I mean, before we arrived? Nobody answered. Thousands, tens of thousands if you count all the small conflicts. They have been fighting continuously for their entire recorded history. Not because they are unusually violent compared to other species, but because they are unusually stubborn. They do not surrender. They do not accept conquest. They adapt and survive, and eventually find a way to win or at least make winning meaningless for the invader. He closed the file. We are not the first ones to invade Earth. We are just the first ones stupid enough to try it with ships they could see coming. What does that mean? I asked. It means humans have been invaded by disease, famine, natural disasters, ice ages, environmental collapse, and each other for hundreds of thousands of years, and they are still here, still fighting, still innovating. We thought we were conquering a primitive species. We were actually attacking the most experienced survivors in this entire sector. The command center was silent, except for the constant stream of bad news coming through the communication channels. Recommendation? Thorvik asked, looking at me. I did not hesitate. Complete withdrawal, immediately, before they demonstrate what else they have been saving for special occasions. Agreed, he said, then looked at Sarna. Send the order. All forces retreat to orbital positions. Begin evacuation procedures. This is defeat, Sarna said, her voice breaking. The Collective Council will have us executed for this failure. Better executed than dead, Thorvik replied. And better defeated than exterminated, because that is what will happen if we stay. The humans are not trying to kill us all. They are trying to make us leave. But if we force them to choose between coexistence and survival, he shook his head. I have read enough of their history to know how that ends. They choose survival. Always. No matter the cost. The evacuation took 4 days and cost us another 800 casualties from harassment attacks that somehow never quite killed enough of us to justify staying to retaliate. The humans had calibrated their aggression perfectly, enough to speed our departure, not enough to make us desperate enough to go scorched earth on our way out. As our ship broke orbit, I watched Earth recede into the darkness, that blue and white sphere that had seemed so vulnerable 7 weeks ago. Final casualty count? Thorvik asked. 4,312 dead, 9,000 wounded, 600 critically. Material losses exceed 40% of invasion force assets. Prisoner exchanges in progress. They are returning our people unharmed in exchange for infrastructure repair materials. And human casualties? I hesitated because the number was obscene. Estimates suggest between 80 and 100,000 dead, triple that wounded. 14 major cities partially destroyed. Infrastructure damage that will take them decades to repair. And they still won, Thorvik said softly. They paid a price that would have broken any other species and they still won. Not won, I corrected. Survived. There is a difference.
Is there?
We left. They stayed. They kept their world. That sounds like victory to me. He was right, though. I hated admitting it. The Collective Council did not execute us when we returned. They were too busy dealing with the larger problem. Word had spread across the galaxy about what happened at Earth. A collective invasion force, one of the most powerful military organizations in 3 sectors, had been defeated by a technologically inferior species using primitive weapons and pure determination. Other species we had conquered started asking uncomfortable questions. If humans could win, why could they not? 3 months after our retreat, the first rebellion broke out in the Kethrak system. 6 months later, 2 more colonies declared independence. Within a year, the Collective had lost 5 of its 17 conquered systems, and the military was stretched too thin to reconquer them. Earth did not just defeat us. They broke the illusion that the Draknor Collective was invincible. I am now stationed on a monitoring post in neutral space, my career effectively over. I spend my days writing reports nobody reads about, threats nobody takes seriously anymore. The Collective is collapsing slowly from within, undermined by the lesson Earth taught the galaxy. Sometimes I review the data from the invasion, trying to pinpoint exactly where we went wrong. The answer is always the same, though it takes different forms depending on which angle I examine it from. We went wrong when we assumed weapons determine wars. They do not. Will does. And humans have more will packed into their fragile bodies than species twice their size and 3 times their technological advancement. They have will that survives losing. Will that adapts to impossible odds? Will that treats surrender as a choice rather than an inevitability? I received a transmission last week from an unknown source. It bounced through 17 relay points before reaching me, untraceable and definitely not authorized by any official channels. It was a video message from that same little girl who delivered the ultimatum in Seattle. "Hello, Vekthor Quin," she said, pronouncing my name carefully. "I am told you are the one who tried to understand us, who studied our history and warned your commanders. I wanted you to know that we appreciate that. Understanding your enemy is the first step toward not needing enemies at all." She smiled, older now by a year but with the same certainty in her eyes. "Earth is rebuilding. We learned a lot from your technology, even though you tried to keep it from us. Reverse engineering is a wonderful thing. We will be fine. Better than fine, actually. You taught us that we can defend ourselves against threats from space. That was a valuable lesson, even if you did not mean to teach it." She leaned closer to the camera. "But here's what I want you to know, Coordinator Quin, what you to understand and maybe share with others who might be thinking about trying what you tried. We did not fight you because we are warriors. We fought you because we had no choice, and we won not because we were strong, but because we refused to accept that strength determines outcomes. Tell your people that Earth remembers. Tell them we do not want war. Tell them we would prefer to meet as friends, as partners, as fellow inhabitants of this galaxy. But also tell them," her smile faded into something harder, "tell them that if anyone else decides to test whether humans will fight for their home, we will show them the same truth we showed you. Weapons are temporary. Will is eternal. And human will?" She laughed. And it was joyful and terrifying in equal measure. Human will breaks empires. The transmission ended. I have not shared it with anyone, though I probably should. What would be the point? The Collective already knows. The galaxy knows. Everyone who was paying attention learned the same lesson we did. written in fire and blood across 7 weeks of occupation that cost us everything. You can defeat human weapons. You can destroy human infrastructure. You can kill human soldiers. But you cannot break human will. And that, ultimately, is why we lost. That is why anyone who tries to conquer Earth will lose. Not because humans are the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced species in the galaxy, but because they absolutely refuse to believe that any of that matters more than their refusal to quit. I think about that sometimes, late in my shift when the monitoring station is quiet and I am alone with my thoughts. How a species that barely reached their own moon a century ago managed to send one of the galaxy's premier military forces running with their tails between their legs. The answer is always the same. They did not fight us with technology. They fought us with themselves, with every ounce of stubborn determination accumulated over millions of years of surviving on a planet that kept trying to kill them. We feared their weapons until we met their will. Then we learned to fear something far worse. We learned to fear what happens when you give humans no choice but to fight. Because when humans fight, they do not fight to win. They fight to survive. And survival, I have learned, is the most dangerous motivation in the universe. So here I sit in my monitoring post, watching Earth from a distance, grateful that the humans decided to let us leave instead of teaching us what else they were capable of. And I wonder sometimes what will happen when humanity finally reaches the stars on their own terms, when they come not as victims but as equals. I suspect the galaxy is going to be a very different place. And I suspect the Draknor Collective will not be the last empire to learn that lesson the hard way. Because humans do not forget. And they definitely do not forgive species that forced them to become what they had to become to survive. I hope I am retired before that day comes. But something tells me I will not be that lucky. Nobody who encountered humanity ever is.